about that. Now are you getting it? Yeah? Can you hear it? Okay. So let's just use this mic and... Okay, welcome everybody. I forgot to see if I got the high sign from Joe. Joe, are we ready to go? Good. All right, welcome to this week's Entrepreneurship seminar. My name is Russ Tanner, and I'm the director of the Grit Center for Rural Entrepreneurship at Snow College. And we're really excited to welcome our guest speaker today, Jason Christensen, and his wife, Meradith, who joined us from Provo. So before I introduce him, there's just a few class items I needed to run through. So real quick, next week, our guest speaker is going to be Weston Dangerfield. He's had multiple product launches that have done over $1 million in sales in their first year. He knows a lot about crowdfunding, product development. He's done some healthcare products and some augmented reality. So it's going to be exciting next week. So make sure you're here for him. Thank you to everybody who's been posting on Canvas your suggestions for who we could have for speakers for this class. I really appreciate that, and especially those of you that have personal connections to people and have introduced me to them. Thank you. Keep that coming. This is your opportunity to contribute and weigh in on who you want to hear from, what industries you want to hear from. So if you haven't seen that discussion, that's going on Canvas right now, and thanks to everybody who's participated in that. I wanted to remind you of just a couple deadlines. So remember that today at midnight, the syllabus quiz closes. So if you haven't done last week's syllabus quiz, make sure you get on and do that today, okay? Because that closes today. Yeah. It's been locked. Has anyone else run into that issue? Okay. So I guess you're not alone. Let me look at that. I know that a lot of people have taken the quiz and not had that issue. So I don't know what happened with the settings. Yeah, that's okay. So it shouldn't be that way. So I will make sure it's open back up today after class. Okay. And tell me your name. Jackson? Okay. Thanks, Jackson. For those of you that have had that issue with the quiz, shoot me a message on Canvas so I make sure that you're able to get into it, okay? Really quick, I want to do 2 recognitions for people that have participated in our first week's discussion, and they did it all on time. So remember that online we had a practice group discussion where you went into small groups, and I just want to show you how there's some of you that had a hard time figuring out how this worked. So hopefully you can see that. I know it's a little bit small. When you go into modules or when you go into discussions, here on the left-hand side, you can click on either one of those, and it will take you into this new Frontiers practice discussion. So you click on this. It takes you into the discussion, and then once you're in here, right here it will show you what group you're in. So it'll say you're in group 20 or you're in group 1. You have to click on your group right here in the top, then it will take you into your group. Then once you're in, you scroll down and you post on reply, and that's where you post your answer. once you post a reply, you'll be able to see other people's responses inside of your group. Okay, so there was kind of some issues about that and some questions, but the only group that actually posted and responded to each other on Sunday, if they're here, I'd like them to just come up real quick. I want to give you a Grit Center t-shirt. Autumn Stilson and James Israelson. You guys here? Yes, James and Autumn. All right, yes, round of applause. Way to be on time and read the instructions. Okay, here I got, that's for you, and Autumn, that's for you. So in the instructions, you were supposed to go in by Sunday, post your original discussion, respond to your group members by today, and then tomorrow there's going to be a peer review. So this is important you know how to do this because this is going to happen every month as part of your grade and your final discussion, okay? So this one's not graded. You don't get any points, but you may get a t-shirt. Way to go. So the last part of this assignment is you're going to get a peer review automatically assigned in Canvas. It'll show up in the sidebar on the right of your screen. It'll say peer review. You click on that, and then you get to go in and you get to evaluate how well you think your classmates have participated in that discussion. There's a rubric. If you click on these three buttons right here, it says show rubric. You can click on that, and then it pulls up. These are the 5 things that you're going to evaluate each other on, okay? And it's got points next to it. So the reason we're going through this, again, is because it's training you how to do it for later in the month and the end of the semester. If you have any questions about that, shoot me a message on Canvas, okay? All right, I think that's all the announcements I had. So let me click back over. So it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce Jason Christensen, who is joining us from Provo today. He spent over the last 20 years of his career in the security and home automation industry. And I know that there were a few of you that have actually asked me if we could hear from somebody in this industry. So I hope you pay attention and take good notes today because Jason has an amazing story of starting out in sales and actually then starting his own company. So he's going to tell us more about that. In 2000, he founded NorthStar Alarm and served as CEO until early 2019. He oversaw the company's growth to over 60,000 active customers in 30 states, one of the largest residential security providers in the nation. A passionate leader, Jason leads by example in living the NorthStar core values of integrity, accountability, and service. He received his bachelor's degree in economics in 1996 from Brigham Young University, graduating with summa cum laude honors. He also received his MBA from BYU in 2005 and currently teaches there as an adjunct professor. I believe you're teaching sales, is that right? So he's got a ton of experience in sales, and regardless of what career you're going to pursue or if you're going to start your own business, selling is a skill that you will need to learn. So I hope you pay attention to Jason. He and his wife Meradith have 5 children and live in Provo. So, and we welcome Meredith as well. So please welcome Jason Christensen.
All right. Well, it's fun to be with you guys. I came down last year. I'm excited to come back down to Snow. I love Ephraim. My sister went to school here, and it's a fun place. If you ever want to have a good time, though, you can always. It's not too far from Provo, so you can always head on up north to Provo if you really want to have fun. All right. It's awesome to be here with you guys. First thing I want to mention that I'm kind of an accidental entrepreneur. When I was your age, I didn't really have any aspirations to start a company, to be perfectly honest. I wasn't really that entrepreneurial minded. I sort of stumbled into it, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that and what my experience was and how I kind of came to start a business. You mentioned we just introduced my wife, and I wanted to just mention a couple of things. Meredith and I got married in 2006, and for me, my wife and my family and being a father, that's really the most important role in my life. And it's been an amazing experience just even the last year to be able to have the flexibility to be able to spend more time with my family. These are my five. You probably can tell she's a lot better looking than I am, and she's also a lot smarter and talented and a lot of other things too. We have 4 daughters, and my oldest is just 12 years old. We finally got a little boy at the end. So we have four daughters, and then my son just turned 3. This is a couple years ago. You can kind of see that's our family. So I thought today I would kind of walk through some of the different steps that I took. And I thought I would share some of the key lessons that I learned along the way. Hopefully that can be beneficial to you guys as I kind of walk through some of those things. It was just mentioned about NorthStar, and the pictures here are a little bit fuzzy. NorthStar, we're based in Orem, Utah. If you've ever been to Orem, a couple of hands up in the air. Anyone from Orem? Provo? Yes. Okay. Well, this building's right next to the University Mall. We employ hundreds of people. We have just over $40 million in revenue today, and as was mentioned, we're really among the very largest of residential security and home automation providers all throughout the nation. We have customers all throughout the entire country. I'm from Utah. I was born, and I grew up in West Valley City. I went to Granger High School. So anyone from that area? Last time where are you from? Kearns, all right, good. Anyone else from the west side? Nobody. One person, all right. Last time I had a few Granger alum here, so. All right, well, so I grew up actually on a small farm. I was one of 7 kids. You can kind of see this picture looks like it was taken during the Great Depression, the one on the left. But, I grew up, we worked on a farm, and I was raised on a farm, so I did farm chores and had all those types of things growing up. I think the experiences I had as a child, I think really helped for me to develop maybe a work ethic. But we didn't have a lot of money. And my dad was a principal, but there were 7 kids in my family. We didn't starve to death, but I always grew up a little bit jealous. My uncle was an attorney, and I was always a little jealous of my cousins because they seemed to just have more stuff. And I was always a little bit jealous of that. Growing up, but I graduated from Granger in '90, and then I went to Brigham Young University, as was mentioned. I want to share an experience. It was really it was the most pivotal experience in my life, and especially I guess in my professional career. I came home from serving a mission in '93, and a friend of mine, and at that time, I was going to BYU, and I was really basically just eking along. I would sell plasma during the week, so I could buy some top ramen, and I had 0 extra funds for, anything like dating or anything. Like, it was just kind of like I was just getting by. And a friend of mine had threw out this idea to go sell. He told me about this idea to go sell pest control out in California. And it seemed like a totally crazy idea. It was really, when I told my dad what I was going to do, they thought I was nuts. They thought, this was some kind of a scam, and what this is crazy. And remember, this would be in the summer of '94. Anyway, the alternative was to either go work on a fishing boat in Alaska, and I was told that I could do that and make $2,000 a month. I think that's what it was, maybe $1,500 a month. The pest control guys said that the average salesperson could make $8,000 in a summer, and that just completely blew my mind. I thought if I could earn $8,000 in a summer, that would be incredible. That would be amazing, and I would be living large after that. So I went out, and I went out and started knocking doors. Anyone here do sales? Anyone here do any door-to-door sales? Raise your hand if you've done any door-to-door sales. Couple people. Okay, so, well, I went out there and I started knocking doors, and I'll never forget. I went to this neighborhood. It was in Santa Maria, California, in the central coast of California. I went out, knocked on a door. We had received maybe 3 hours of training before, and I went out and I knocked on this door and I said, "Hi, my name's Jason. I'm here. I'm here with Terminex, and we can take care of your bugs, and we kill spiders and ants and cockroaches." And I remember the person just, as I was talking, they had opened the door a little bit, and just literally as I was talking, they didn't even say anything. They just shut the door in my face, mid pitch, and I was like, "Ouch, that was tough." And I went out and I went at it, and I knocked for the rest of the afternoon. I went out and knocked doors, and literally I had that same experience over and over. It was terrible. It was horrible. I hated it. And I got back to the car, and my partner, who I was knocking with, he had actually sold an account, and I was so mad. I was like, I wasn't even close. I wasn't even close to selling something. So I went and I did this for 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, there was 8 guys in our office, eight guys that were working in that area, and at the end of the day, we'd come post our sales stats. And every day I was last. Every day after 2 weeks, I had sold 2 accounts, which at that rate, I think I probably would have earned enough gas money to get myself back home by the end of the summer. I wasn't even covering my cost of living at that point. And I was dead last in the office. I remember walking back to my apartment, and as I walked back, I was totally depressed. And in my mind, I was like, I just can't keep doing this. I can't continue to, this. I couldn't do this. So something had to change. I was right at that moment. I was sort of at this crossroads. I had listened to some inspiring messages. There was a recording that was done by Earl Nightingale that kind of stuck in my head. And I remember, and that night I went home and I made the choice. I said, "Gosh darn it," and I probably might have said something else worse than that. But I said, "I am going to freaking figure this out. I'm going to figure this out." And by gosh, sorry, this is BYU talk. By gosh, I am going to learn how to do sales. I'm going to become good at sales. And at that time, my mind shifted to becoming completely singular focused on one objective, and that was to be good at sales, and nothing else mattered. And I spent that whole weekend. I just devoured any sales, and I studied everything, and I went through it all in my mind. The next Monday, after this whole weekend, I had some epiphanies over the weekend to do some things differently. And I went out, and this could be a whole nother conversation about what happened, but I went out and I made some very specific changes to what I was saying, and when I went out and started knocking doors again. And that day, on Monday, I sold 3 accounts in one day. And I came home, and I remember proudly posting my stats, and the guys in the office were like, they're like, "Christensen, that guy, he sucks at sales. Like, you know, and they're like, how, what? And they were all shocked. And from that point, I became a complete student of sales. And I was like constantly striving to get better and better and better. And literally from that day forward, the crazy thing, and I don't know why this happened, but the crazy thing was I went from being the worst in the office. There was not a day, there was one day for the entire summer where I wasn't the top person in sales in that office. Every day I sold the most accounts of anyone on my team for the rest of the summer, and I finished the summer as the top first-year sales rep in the company. I sold 350 accounts that summer. That experience, now, I want to pose that, and I want to throw this out there to you guys as a question, had I gone home, which is what I wanted to do, that would have been the comfortable thing, the easy thing to do would have been to go home. And had I gone home, then what would be my conversation about me as a salesman? What would I say about myself as far as sales go? What would you think? I suck at sales. Yeah, I'm just no good at sales, right? That's how I would have, my identity then for the rest of my life would have been, I'm just not good at sales, right? So this is a really important idea that I want to kind of impress, if nothing else, this is an important idea that I want to impress upon you. There's a difference between what's called an optimistic mindset and a pessimistic mindset. And a lot of times people will say, well, it's just, you've got to have a good attitude. It's all about just having a good attitude. And that's like sort of an emotional thing. I think some days we feel motivated and sometimes we don't. Really, one thing that I've concluded, though, is and learned is that the difference between an optimistic mindset and a pessimistic mindset is it's more cognitive. And what I mean by that, it's how you interpret failure in your mind. So either you see a failure as something that becomes part of your identity, meaning I sucked at sales for 2 weeks, which means that I'm just no good at sales, and that's now my permanent identity. So that is the pessimistic mindset, is when we allow failures to become part of our identity, versus the optimistic mindset. Optimists experience failure, but the difference is that an optimistic mindset will see the failure as being temporary. It's, I'm not good at sales, and there's one word, and if you ever find yourself saying this about anything, I'm not good at dating. I'm just not good at it. Or I am no good at math. I'm disorganized. If you ever find yourself saying anything like that because you have some experience that makes you think that, then I would just say you could add one simple word, and that is just add the word yet, at the end of that. So add the word yet. And at least that allows for the possibility. The takeaway is that when you experience failures, which we all do, that the failures don't need to define you. Mistakes don't need to define you. I mean, there's a whole other conversation about that. That these are just simply experiences, and that our personal capabilities they're not static. I mean, it's crazy. You think about this, and it's crazy. I went from having an identity for the rest of my life that I suck at sales to literally feeling like in 2 years later, I felt like I was the best salesperson. I just felt like, at least in the pest control industry, I was confident that 2 years later in 1996, I was confident that I was the best salesperson in the entire industry. Because it was 2 years later, I'm going to step back. In 1995, the best salesperson in the industry of all the companies that were doing this sold about 450 accounts. Well, I went out in 1996, and I decided, I spent a year managing an office, and then I went out the next year, and I sold just under 700 pest control accounts that following summer. So it didn't just break the record. I'm not telling this like to brag or say, well, it's not. But it more just to illustrate this concept and how extreme that can go from literally believing that I suck at something to all of a sudden now proving, that I'm the best. I'm the best at this. And that changed the entire trajectory of my career completely. Everything that I did after that was attributed to that experience selling, knocking doors. It's an amazing, and by the way, I teach sales at BYU. I know that there's classes here. It's the best thing that you can learn, because whether you're going to go into sales or professional selling, selling is a part of every aspect of life, and your level of success will largely be determined by your ability to sell. And when I say sell, I don't mean necessarily knocking doors and selling a product, but being able to effectively persuade and move people. Any role of leadership that you have really largely is essentially selling when you're talking about persuading. I spent 20 years as a CEO, and every day was a sales day. Every day is a sales day, because you are always persuading, enrolling people in, if nothing else, in ideas. All right. I want to make sure we keep moving along here. What do we go till? 20 minutes. Okay. So the other experience I had here, and I really quickly, was after my first summer of selling, I decided that I wanted to manage. And I went to the company that I worked for. I was their top first year rep, and I said, I feel good, I feel confident in my selling. I think I can become a manager. Well, it turns out my manager, who wasn't actually even that great of a salesperson, he was actually a good manager, but he wasn't a great sales guy yet. He had told the owner, the president of the company, he said, yeah, I don't really recommend Jason as a manager. I don't think you should hire him as a manager. I don't know why he said that, but he kind of blackballed me a little bit, and so they wouldn't hire me as a manager. So I opened up the phone book, because I wanted to be a manager. I opened up the phone book, and I looked up pest control companies in the phone book, and I literally called the first one I found. I told them what I had sold the previous year, and I said I wanted to be a manager for them. They said, come in. They hired me immediately, and I managed, and I wanted that experience to add to, I just wanted to have that experience. Which also, another thing, where I didn't necessarily know how to, but I learned. And really, I feel like as an entrepreneur, this has really largely defined my entire career. What I mean by that is, what I mean by that is that when I started NorthStar, I started NorthStar, I worked in this little office right here. This is where the company started. I know there's only a couple of you that are from Provo, but if you've been to BYU, if you've ever visited BYU, this is a little building just south of BYU campus on 700 East. It's been there forever. And I worked out of this little, right here was my office. And you can't really tell from this picture, but this is kind of like a slice of pizza. Like, it goes right to a little corner, and it's probably like 300 square feet. And I sat and that's where I started. I started NorthStar in that office. I don't know, we paid maybe $200 a month rent or something like that for this small little office. And the first summer, I worked out of that office all by myself. I was the only person there, and then everybody else that we had we had hired was out working, in different places. So I did everything. This symbolically, the idea of you as an entrepreneur, when you're starting out, you have to wear a lot of different hats. And what I mean by that is that I managed all the books. I placed all the orders. I did all the payroll. I wrote contracts. I designed newsletters. I mean, it was HR. What else? Operations, customer service, everything. And even to this day, it's kind of funny. I can like look, and NorthStar today has hundreds of employees that all specialize in these different areas, and I can always say, look, I've done every single one of your jobs, which is kind of, it's neat and it's unique to be able to do that. But really, so part of this process, though, as an entrepreneur, is you start out and you sort of have to become kind of a jack of all trades to some extent. But for me, one of the biggest challenges is I had as an entrepreneur was that when I actually had to let go, I would hold on to things, and I had a hard time early on. I had an experience when I managed pest control back at the, once again, one of my very first experiences. I managed this pest control office, and I was working like 16 hours a day, and the company finally, I was like on the verge of an emotional breakdown. I was dating a girl, and she had visited me, and I remember the night before she was leaving, I just literally had a breakdown. I started bawling, and I mean, this is so hard. I hate this. It was like this kind of embarrassing thing that I look back on. But I was just like right on the verge. I had just run myself ragged with what I was doing to try to take care of all this stuff. And they let me hire somebody. And there was this girl that came in to help me. And I remember at the end of the first day, she was just kind of observing, and she was like 17 or something. I remember she's like, you really need some help. Like, you really have got to, like, let other people do something. So, and it was kind of something that stuck with me. I realized, okay, well, you have to be able to trust other people. And in that process, there's, a lot of times you'll hear the term trust, but verify. And it was an important lesson for me. I was a bit of a perfectionist, and I had this belief that somehow I was going to do it better than somebody else. And the truth is that a lot of times other people actually did it better than me once I actually realized, and allowed them to do their jobs and got out of their way, and finding good and talented people that shared the same values as I did, but then just allow them to do what they need to do and to do their jobs. It was like after I'd started NorthStar, like 5 years after the company had been started, I had a guy, and I was still wearing a lot of these hats at the time, but there was one of the guys, he started out just in our call center as a customer service, answering customer calls. And he had worked himself up, and he was really smart, really talented, and I trusted him explicitly. He was one of the most trustworthy people I really ever knew. He was managing a few people at the time, and I remember he walked into my office one day, and I was again at this point where I was running myself ragged, trying to take care of all these different functions. I was still kind of had a lot of these hats on, and he walked in and he said, you need some help. It's kind of like what he said again. And he said, why don't you let me take over the finances for the company? And I said, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. I said, all right, I'm going to let you handle the books. So he basically took over the finances, took over all the books. Best decision I ever made in 2005. Today, he's the CFO of the company. He's on the board. He's a shareholder. And literally, it was a job he started out with working as a college student, and is the CFO of a large company today. Really important, but the other part of this is, if I kind of go back the last 20 years, really the last 20 years, if I look back on that time, it was just a series of removing these hats. It's taking off hats, and becoming more and more specialized, and ultimately it was a little bit more of an executive role, and that was part of the reason actually. I mean, it was a long time to be, and to see to be able to experience over a 20-year period, to be able to watch a company that had one person working in the office to hundreds of employees, and just the evolution, sometimes it was kind of shocking. It was really, sitting around and looking at, I had these moments where I'm like, this is crazy. I don't know how this, became what it became. The history of NorthStar, I don't know. You probably can't really see this very well. In fact, I'm sure you can't. But if you start in 2000, and I'll just kind of, a couple things here I want to mention is, it took from 2000 to 2012. So 12 years before, in our business, NorthStar is a little different from other companies in the security industry. From the beginning, our business, we decided that we wanted to keep our customer accounts. We would hold our paper, if that makes sense. Most of the companies that do security, or pest control, or solar, any of those things. Who said they've sold before? Raise your hand. What have you sold? Pest control, what about you? Pest control, all right. Most pest control companies, they're selling pest control, and the contracts would go to like a nationwide provider like Terminix or ADT, but some of them don't. Some of them keep their contracts. Early on, we were the only company, there was a bunch of competition, but we were the only company that was keeping our paper in-house. That's very capital intensive. It costs a lot of money to be able to hold every account that we created. It was a lot less expensive in 2001 than it is today, but every account, it would cost essentially over $1,000 to generate a new account. So kind of times that, if you do 100 accounts, that's going to cost you $100,000, and that's how much money we had to come up with. So it was very difficult, challenging, expensive. We were able to get some debt financing early on that allowed us to kind of get to a certain point. But it took 12 years before we reached, after 12 years, we had reached $1 million of recurring monthly revenue. That's how we measured kind of the size we were at. It was like $1 million of recurring monthly revenue. It's about 20,000 customer accounts. So it took 12 years, but then from 2012 to 2017, we tripled that. So in the next 5 years, we went from having $1 million to over $3 million of recurring monthly revenue. The only thing I just, with that, and with this whole point, I guess the takeaway on that is that I think a lot of young people, you will hear about somebody that goes out and starts a business, and then 2 years later they sold it for $1 bajillion, right? And we all hear those stories, okay? But more often than not, it takes time, and it's a significant sacrifice. I can't, it's hard to go back and tell you like the heartache and the different challenges that I experienced, but I think one of the key lessons, one of the key lessons I would say, I would just want you to take away from that is to be patient, and also to be willing to self-sacrifice. There's so many guys that I see that they want to start paying themselves all this money right off the bat. They're draining their company by paying themselves. I personally, my philosophy for the first 8 years was that I looked at it as an investment, and if I was going to put money, in a savings account or invest it in real estate, or where was the best place for me to put my money, and my belief was that I believed in what I was doing, and I could see, I had the financial models to show what a dollar that was invested in my company was going to create. And so because of that, I wanted to pay myself the very minimum, which is kind of weird. I've told this before. My wife, Meradith, we got engaged in 2006 when we got married, so it was fairly early on at this time. And it's a normal thing that you would talk about with your fiancé is it's a good thing. I would encourage, who's married? Raise your hand. Okay, a lot of you aren't married. So I would encourage you. You probably want to talk about finances. And Meradith was smart, and one day, we had this kind of weird conversation. She asked me, I'm not sure how to ask you this, but how much money do you make? And I was like, and I was a little bit embarrassed because I didn't make a lot. I was like, originally, I think I was paying myself $30,000, $40,000 a year, which, it was enough, and I had maybe a little bit more. So I tried to explain, well, I'm not really paying myself that much because we talked about how we want to leave money in the business. There was like 10 other employees that made more money than I did at NorthStar, and I was the CEO. Like most of our sales guys made more money than I did. But that was just by choice. Like I could have paid myself more money, but I chose to invest it in the company. Ultimately, I started out with a partner, and this was actually, I started NorthStar. In 2000, I had a partner. He owned a smaller percentage than I did, but by 2005, this actually had become kind of a source of conflict between us, was that he wanted to start taking more money out of the company and basically paying himself more because, we had achieved some level of success, and I didn't want to. And ultimately, we kind of came to this point where he wanted to do something else, and I didn't want to. I still wanted to I believed in the company still, and he didn't, or he had some other things that he wanted to do. And so we had to work through this whole, we worked through a separation. So in 2005, we came up with a creative way where I was able to buy him out. And I just say on that, it's very likely you'll have business partners. This could have been a really terrible experience, and it can be really hard. I mean, sometimes it's, especially like with family or people that are friends, which is often, it ruins those relationships when you go through this experience. I think one of the things I'm most proud about was I was able to navigate that separation in a way where our friendship stayed intact. And what's crazy about that was he left the industry, and then 2 years later, he actually got back into the industry and started another company, and he was a competitor. I'm not saying we didn't have some challenges, but I went to lunch with him just a couple months ago, and I still consider him a good friend, and I respect him, and which is so I'm happy about that. And I think with that I would just say, look, a few things. Relationships matter. Yes. Okay. And the other thing, I have a picture of Dumbo here, which you're like, well, what's the picture of Dumbo? It was really, really scary when I separated with my partner, because all of a sudden I was like, I was like that feeling where all of a sudden I'm like, I'm all by myself. And my partner was sort of like a security blanket for me. So it was a huge leap of faith to go off at that point and to go out on my own. I just say, look, at the same time, it's good to have partners, and there's good reasons to have partners, but also you should have confidence and believe in yourself as well. And that ultimately proved to be the very best thing I possibly could have done. I want to mention, the last thing, and this was really there's a quote that I love that I want to share. One of the unique things about NorthStar is that when the company was created, from the very beginning, I defined 3 core values. And those were the same core values that carried forward for the entire time. And the 3 principles were integrity, which I just want to say that each principle also has a very specific definition. So, and these were principles that I believed in very strongly. Integrity, I defined it as we keep our commitments. And the way that worked culturally within NorthStar was, if I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. And if you tell me you're going to do something, you do it. Okay? And it doesn't matter if it's, I'll send you an email today, or I'll call you back. Like, it's the small, these little tiny, what seem like insignificant things, that's really ultimately what I believe ultimately defines your character and your integrity. So this was a part of the standard that was expected, that we were able to expect of each other as employees of the company. The second principle is accountability. And we defined accountability as we take responsibility for our results, which is a little different than what most people, how they define accountability. The term that we use to talk about accountability, we actually usually use the word that defines the opposite to help people understand the principle. The opposite, we call it being a victim, okay? And a victim is somebody that just sees the world as a bunch of circumstances, that the results or the outcome is dictated by exterior forces. The opposite is accountability, which really ultimately means is that I am the source of the outcome. I own and take ownership for the results. And the third is service, that service is the core of our focus. And that as we focus on serving, that ultimately your compensation should be proportional, we believe, to the level and the quality of service that you give. But the focus is on serving first, and money comes as a consequence. The quote here is, "It's not easy to be a man of integrity when all about you there are those who forsake principles for expediency." There's a time and a place for massive sacrifice. And to be successful as an entrepreneur, you do have to kind of sell your soul to that. It doesn't have to be permanent, though. That's all I'm going to say. And ultimately, I would just encourage you to still remember that even though there's a season of sacrifice, the most important things in life are family and relationships. And those are the those that we get to take with us when we die. I know I want to open up for questions, but those are the thoughts I have. Great being with you guys today. I hope there's maybe a couple things that I've said that have been helpful for you. Open it up to some questions.
If you need to run, you're welcome to go, because I know it's 1:20. So if you need to leave, but if anyone has questions, let's hear them. And also, I have 2 slots for lunch with Jason and Meradith. 2 people couldn't go. So if you want to go to lunch with them right now, come up here and hang out. Any questions?
If there's any questions, we'll be here, and you can come. Yeah, just come up and grab me if you want to ask anything.